Woke Supremacy News.
A pitched legal battle arguing that Donald Trump's lawyers should not get to see the classified documents seized at Mar-a-Lago during the upcoming special master review. As that appeal plays out, CNN has learned Trump's team told the National Archives last year that the missing White House documents at Mar-a-Lago were just 12 boxes of newspaper clippings. But a few months later, they handed over 15 boxes containing 184 classified documents. And then in August, the FBI seized another 33 boxes from Trump's property containing 103 classified documents. Let's discuss with two former Trump administration officials, Olivia Troy. She was an advisor to Vice President Pence, and Stephanie Grisham, of course, was the press secretary in the Trump White House. Stephanie, let me start with you. This sounds like a game of telephone. To some extent. Former Trump lawyer Pat Philbin told the archives that Mark Meadows told him that there were a dozen boxes with newspaper clippings. Does anybody actually know what was in those boxes? I mean, this is almost comical.
Well, that would explain our entire administration. Good to see you, Jim. I would say that people do believe there were newspaper clippings in there because that is how he traveled. We would travel with the boxes, is what we called them, and there were in fact newspaper clippings in there, but there was also work in there, and there were magazines, and there were things he wanted to sign for people and to send to people. So the boxes did always have newspaper clippings. I would imagine Pat Philbin was told that there were clippings. He is an honest, righteous, moral attorney. I don't think he would ever do anything to cover up for Donald Trump or Mark Meadows or anyone else. So I believe he was told that, and he, in good faith, gave that message along. Mark Meadows, he knows better. I know what was in those boxes in terms of every day that we worked. The boxes followed the president everywhere, and there was always work in there with newspaper clippings. It was a mess. It was the Trump filing system. So Mark Meadows had to know, and it's certainly Trump seems like he knows. Says he declassified everything. So if it was just newspaper clippings, what is it that Trump declassified? That's kind of my question right now.
Right, and Olivia, I mean, just if you could pick up where Stephanie left off on this whole mess of, mixing top secret or SCI documents, as they're called in some cases, just mixed in with scrapbook material, press clippings, magazine articles, and so on. I mean, what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, it's completely ludicrous insanity to have these classified documents just mixed in with, it's like souvenirs, right? And meanwhile, lives are on the line here. Very sensitive information that belongs to the U.S. government. It does not belong to the former president. This is something years, decades of service has coming together to develop this. And so the fact that, I'm very confused about the fact that it seems like it's ping pong now. It's like a game of hot potato of who knew what was in the box, who didn't know what was in the box. And I agree with Stephanie. I do think that Pat Philbin was just repeating what he was told. But I do think that it's important to investigate and get to the bottom of this and just who was involved in what appears to be the complete cover-up of this.
And Stephanie, Trump, I'm sure you saw this, spoke with the conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt. He was asked what would happen if he were to face charges. Let's listen to that.
If it happened, I think you'd have problems in this country, the likes of which perhaps we've never seen before. I don't think the people of the United States would stand for it.
What kind of problems, Mr. President?
I think you'd have big problems. Big problems.
Stephanie, is Trump once again saying the riot part out loud?
Absolutely, in my opinion, and make no mistake, I think that was a call to arms. I think he's asking for the extremist part of the MAGA community to get prepared if something should happen to their king. He learned nothing from January 6th, except for he knows he's got a group of very, very loyal followers who will believe anything he says and will do anything he says, which is exactly what we saw with the January 6th committee hearings when they showed videos of some of the people on the Capitol steps saying the president said to go home, or, the president said Mike Pence is a traitor, let's get him. It's clear, and he knows very well that these people will do whatever he says. So in my opinion, it was another call to arms because he's getting nervous. And it's disgusting. And once again, I'm waiting for Republican leadership to start saying now there's no room for violence. I mean, we're ramping up. We've got how many investigations going now? So it's scary to me. I hate hearing that rhetoric. And I hope I don't really think, but I hope that people will step up and say, let's let this play out.
And Olivia, having worked for Mike Pence, I suppose you understand exactly what Trump is saying here.
Absolutely, and we've seen this before when he does this. And look, what he's trying to do is it's intimidation, and he's trying to scare Americans. That's what he's actually trying to do. He's trying to message and say, keep holding me above the law. Yeah. I don't want to be held accountable.
Yeah, and the Justice Department too, I suppose. He's sending a message.
Exactly. I mean, this is what he does.
And Stephanie, let me ask you about this new book that's coming out from Peter Baker of the New York Times and his wife Susan Glasser, who's also a reporter. They say that Melania Trump slammed Trump's handling of COVID at one point, telling the quote, and this is according to their book, "You're blowing this. It's going to be really bad, and you need to take it more seriously." They write that he dismissed her concerns, and I'm just wondering, because you worked with the First Lady during this administration, you were there during the first months of the pandemic, many months of the pandemic. Did you hear any of this?
Oh, yes. I mean, Melania Trump was the first in our administration to really come out and put videos out saying wear a mask. She was very responsible with COVID, and you know, our whole East Wing was not working in the White House when everybody else was working on the West Wing. So I know she definitely talked to him about taking it seriously, and absolutely I know he dismissed her and said it'll be fine. I'm not sure about, you know, if she said you are blowing this, but it rings true to me. She was very, very cautious and nervous and worried about Americans and staff and her family when COVID was going on. And
Olivia, I know because you worked with the Vice President's office that there were people across the administration, across the White House and the EEOB, who just thought Trump was blowing it on COVID. I mean, I would hear it all the time from Trump officials.
Yeah, look, this is absolutely true. And honestly, it's infuriating when I read these accounts, knowing that hundreds of thousands of Americans have died of COVID. I'm in my hometown of El Paso right now visiting. El Paso was certainly hit hard with COVID. They suffered under it, as many other cities across the country. And look, I'm glad that these stories are coming out in books because it is true. Everyone knew the situation, and this is the result of a man who exhibited complete recklessness when it came to leading our country during that really, really challenging time.
All right, Olivia Troye, Stephanie Grisham, great to see both of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And a few people are dead after a mid-air plane collision in Colorado. It happened earlier today in Boulder County, about 35 miles north of Denver. You can see the wreckage of two small planes, one of them identified as a single-engine Cessna carrying two people. Both of them died. The third victim was on board the other aircraft. The FAA and the NTSB are investigating what happened. Baltimore prosecutors are asking for a new trial for Adnan Syed, a man whose murder conviction was the subject of the hugely popular first season of the true crime podcast Serial. Syed was arrested 23 years ago as a high school senior accused of strangling his ex-girlfriend Hae Min Lee and dumping her body in a park. Syed, who has always maintained his innocence, was sentenced to life in prison, and many thought the case was over until the podcast Serial debuted.
This is a Global CalLink prepaid call from
Adnan Syed,
an inmate at...
The podcast quickly broke records and has since been downloaded more than 300 million times.
On paper, the case was like a Shakespearean mashup. Young lovers from different worlds, thwarting their families, secret assignations, jealousy, suspicion, and honor besmirched. The villain, not a Moor exactly, but a Muslim all the same. And a final act of murderous revenge. In the main stage, a regular old high school across the street from a 7-Eleven.
Now, after a nearly year-long investigation, the state's attorney's office says there is new evidence pointing to the possible involvement of two alternative suspects, and they say Syed should be released pending a new trial. With me now to talk about this is attorney and advocate Rabia Chaudhry, who is the author of Adnan's story, The Search for Truth and Justice After Serial. She is also the executive producer of the HBO documentary series, The Case Against Adnan Syed. HBO, we should mention, like CNN, is part of Warner Brothers Discovery. Rabia, thank you so much for being with us. This is just a phenomenally fascinating case, and I know you have known Syed for years, since he was a child. You understand the human dimension of all of this. Have you had a chance to correspond with him since this announcement that prosecutors are asking for a new trial?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me, Jim. Yeah, I spoke to Adnan on the evening that the motion was filed, and I spoke to his family that day. And we are very, of course, happy, but cautiously optimistic. We have gotten close before to getting his conviction thrown out. In fact, it has been twice, and then it was reinstated. So, it's been a very long 23-year battle, but we've never had really the state on our side, which is essentially what's happened since the prosecutors filed this motion.
And you've kept up the story with your own podcast, Undisclosed, and you were the person who pitched his story to NPR's Sarah Koenig, who did the Serial podcast. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was in the courtroom on the day that Adnan was convicted. He was my younger brother's best friend. I'd known Adnan since he was a child. So the entire trial, conviction, prosecution was really shocking to me, and I helped the family navigate through the appellate process for many years, and until I gave up. I gave up on the courts, and I decided we needed a journalist to look at this. We needed some media attention. We had given 16 years to the courts to get it right, and they hadn't. And so I reached out to Sarah Koenig, who had been a reporter for the Baltimore Sun, and the rest is history.
Right, and the podcast has just been phenomenally popular globally, and it's been unbelievable to see the response to this case. And you mentioned a previous order for a new trial was overturned. You were just indicating this a few moments ago. This has been a long struggle for justice. Why is this time different for people who don't understand the law, would you say?
Well, this time is different because up until about 3 years ago, the Attorney General of Maryland was handling the case. Only a year ago did the case finally go to the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. We approached them to take a look at it to see if nothing else, if Adnan could be considered to be resentenced. But as they started digging into the case, because he was sentenced as a juvenile and was sentenced to a life sentence, which the Supreme Court says is unconstitutional. But as they started looking at the case, they realized this might be an innocence case, which is obviously what we've been saying for a long time. And in this past spring, they joined us in a motion to test the DNA in the physical evidence we have. And this is just kind of the next move. They are no longer convinced that he is guilty of this crime, and they have 2 other good suspects.
Yeah, the Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby said prosecutors are not asserting at this time that Mr. Syed is innocent, but that the state lacks confidence in the integrity of the conviction. That's pretty remarkable, and that Syed should get a new trial. That is just incredible. What do you make of all of this and where things stand right now? Do you think you're on the path to justice?
I think we are finally on that path. And, I think one of the most heartening things about this development with the state's attorney is that it's not just about exonerating Adnan, but they have an open investigation. They already have a team of homicide detectives in Baltimore City assigned to reinvestigating this case. And I've worked about 20 odd in innocence cases. In many cases, when somebody's exonerated, the guilty party's never caught. The state just lets the case go. So we're really happy to see that's not what's going to happen here. And we are really praying for justice for Hae-Min Lee, the victim, that the person who killed her is in fact arrested for this crime.
All right, we'll continue to watch and listen to all the developments in this. Rabia Chaudhry, thank you very much. Please stay in touch with us on all of this. We greatly appreciate it. To Las Vegas now, where the accused killer of Jeff German, a local investigative journalist seen here, is speaking out for the first time from jail.
What do you have to say for the charge you're facing now?
Unfortunately, I can't comment on it, obviously, given that it's ongoing, and I hope you understand. I just wanted to try to, do my best and be the best person I can be. And
Robert Tellis is charged with stabbing German to death. The Clark County Public Administrator lost his re-election bid in June and allegedly was upset about articles written by German that detailed a hostile work environment at Tellis's office and a relationship with a staffer. Kingdom honors the life and legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. Thousands of miles away, a group of elders in Kenya hope her death will prompt her son, King Charles, to right the colonial wrongs of the past. Here's CNN's David McKenzie.
Jim, the Nandi elders in Kenya are saying that their paramount chief at the turn of the last century, after trying to stop railway construction through their ancestral land, was killed by the British military after he was lured to an apparent peace negotiation. They believe that his head was taken to the United Kingdom. They're now asking King Charles to send it back. It speaks to the ongoing generational trauma felt by many in former British colonies. In these countries, the opinion of the Queen's legacy and of British royalty is complicated at best.
Colonialism treated Africans in Kenya as beings resembling human beings, but subhuman, something that, and they treated them as such. That dehumanization is what I would plead with the British government, now His Majesty's government, to accept and atone.
To apologize for actions like the brutal suppression of the Mau Mau rebellion that began the year the Queen ascended to the throne in 1952. Some 10 years ago, Mau Mau veterans received an expression of regret from the British government and some level of compensation, but many believe the settlement was not broad enough. Here in South Africa, there are growing calls for the Cullinan diamond, also known as the Star of Africa, this 500-carat diamond central to the crown jewels, to be returned to the country. It was given as a gift to the Queen's uncle, King Edward, and as King Charles cements his reign, the call for atonement and restitution will likely only grow louder. Jim?
And thanks to David for that report. In the meantime, Broadway's longest-running show is closing its doors. Phantom of the Opera will play for 5 more months before the final curtain, now scheduled for February 18th, the months after the show's 35th anniversary. Ticket sales for the production slowed during the pandemic, dropping by almost 70,000 weekly attendees over the last 4 months. But luckily, international productions of the show will continue. I haven't seen it before. You can still see it in places like London, Australia. Action to the Queen's death would be massive. But this, I suppose, is bigger than anything anyone could have imagined.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And it's probably right and fitting, bearing in mind the length of Her Majesty's reign. What I'm also very touched by and notice, every shop that I go past has a tribute in its window, whether it be a digital display of Her Majesty, an expression of condolence. Everywhere you go, there is some reminder that this country has lost its sovereign and has really lost a bit of its anchor, in a sense. And the other thing fascinating is the number of places everywhere that will be shut on Monday. Things that you wouldn't think about necessarily, Jim. So, for example, gyms are closing because they want people to be able to what they want their staff to be able to pay respects. Most shops will be closed on Monday because they will open in the afternoon afterwards. So altogether, it's the totality of the event that I think is most extraordinary. One point to note, Jim, you were just talking about the line, to the queue, as we say, to go in. My producer's just going to show me exactly what is the current line. It's 17 hours is the estimated queuing time.
Wow.
Now, 17 hours. Now, the important thing there, Jim, is remember they're closing the lying in state at 06:30 Monday morning. So now work back 17 hours into Sunday, because obviously they don't want people joining the line who subsequently won't get in. I'm guessing that that line will close sometime tomorrow morning, Sunday.
And Richard, what do we expect to see tomorrow on this final day of the Queen lying in state before her funeral? You were indicating some of that. It sounds like the line may be growing longer, the queue may be growing longer because people want to pay their final respects before they can't do it anymore.
Right, but there'll come a point when they won't be allowed to join the queue because there wouldn't be time for them to go all the way through it until they get to the actual the Westminster Hall. I'm guessing that'll be about 6:30, maybe 7, 8, 9 tomorrow morning, Sunday morning. As for other events, the big event tomorrow that people are watching is going to be the reception in the evening that will be held by the King and members of the working royals, not, let's be clear, not Meghan and Harry, they're not working royals. But the working royals will be having a reception at Buckingham Palace for world leaders and diplomats. I fully expect President Biden will be going. And we'll also look tomorrow to see if President Biden goes to pay his respects at Westminster Hall. We expect him to. Of course, it's never confirmed till it happens. But along with others, he will be going through. He won't have to wait 24 hours, but he will be going through. And then there's an evening reception.
Right, of course, and as you and I both know, Richard, with the travels of the President of the United States, we'll find out when it happens. But let me ask you about this reception at Buckingham Palace tomorrow night. What is going on with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? We have some CNN exclusive reporting. Were they invited by mistake? What can you tell us?
Simple here, Jim. They should never have been invited. This is a reception for working royals, those who are paid for by the government and receive money from the system. And Meghan and Harry are no longer working royals by their own choice, it must be said. They were invited by accident, and then somebody realized and then pointed out that this was only for working royals. So it's not they've been disinvited, but they've been told they were invited by mistake. To be blunt, I think it's bloody clumsy what's happened. If you've invited, I mean, look, we've all invited people by mistake to a party. You just stick with it. You know, you don't create another you go with it. You don't create a furore, particularly when you know the sensitivities around this particular couple and the royal family. But it wasn't a snub. It wasn't intentional. They weren't meant to be invited. They were by accident, and the royals have managed to get themselves again into hot water.
All right, Richard Quest, thank you very much. I guess we had to expect some speed bumps, some stumbles along the way. With all the
Jim, if that's the only one, then we're lucky.
All right, Richard, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Well said. To the long lines of people now waiting 17 hours and walking miles to pay their respects. CNN's Anna Stewart is with the queue, waiting to see the Queen's coffin as she lies in state. Anna, I guess there's a part of me that perhaps it's the American in me who is way too impatient to do something like this, to wait 17 hours in line for anything. But please make no comment there. But at the same time, I'm just wondering, how do you power through 17 hours of standing in line?
Well, from the people I've spoken to, you power through with coffee, tea, biscuits, the odd pint of beer, and lots of chit-chat with your friends. I'll show you the line. It stretches at the moment for many, many miles. Looking at the live tracker, it says it's now 17 hours long. That's actually shorter than it was yesterday. At one stage, it was 24 hours long. And for the people in it, they are bracing themselves for a very long, I would say quite cold night. I'm feeling pretty chilly. Emily is one of the people that has joined the queue from Reading, not too far from London. How long have you been queuing for now?
We've been in it about 3 hours, 3.5 hours.
And how are you feeling at this stage?
We're still feeling good at the moment.
Still feeling good?
Still feeling good. It's getting a little bit cold.
If you could slow down just a little bit, I promise I won't lose your place. But just tell me why you're doing this, because I think for some of our audience, they'll think, my goodness, these people are queuing for almost 24 hours. What are they thinking?
I think it's just, I really want to pay my respects to the Queen, for myself, for my grandparents who can't be here at the moment. And it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we're going to get to say thank you to her for all her service.
And you're enjoying this queue, the mood?
I'm enjoying the mood, yeah. Everyone's been so lovely, and the atmosphere back there was just brilliant.
Wonderful. Well, I'll let you get on. I won't let them lose their place entirely. I'd love to introduce you to some other people. There was one genius person right here who, show me what you've got here. Oh, she's going to be showing her. She's holding a bucket. Can you show us your bucket?
There's a hole.
This bucket is not what it seems. It's actually a seat. Very clever idea, because you're not allowed to bring necessarily seats and infrastructure in with you, but this bucket can be turned away, so I think it's brilliant. And you guys have all made friends since you've been in this queue.
We have.
Well, we're getting on quite well, yeah.
Not much else to do.
How are you feeling about the queue? You happy?
Yeah, it's moving pretty good. Yeah, no big delays.
We're just being overtaken though.
You are being overtaken. I'm sorry.
I have to cut this now.
We're going to have to cut this short. Best of luck with the rest of your queue, though.
Thank you so much.
This is part of the problem, Jim, is that the queue, it stops for a little bit, never actually long enough for anyone to sit on a bucket. It moves pretty fast and relentlessly for many, many hours. And I have seen small children, people over the age of 70 doing this queue.
I imagine Anna's going to carry folks through this. Let me ask you, I mean, what are people allowed to bring with them as they wait? You mentioned they can't bring seats, but I suppose they can bring just about anything else to stay warm. I know it's going to be cold tonight in London. How is that going to affect things?
There's definitely a balance, isn't there, as terms of, do you want to bring things that are going to weigh a lot for your 12-hour walk, but then it's quite nice to have an extra pair of shoes, maybe an extra coat. So I think that's a balance people are trying to strike. When you're actually going through Westminster Hall, there is airport-style security, so people have been told not to bring big chairs or any kind of infrastructure, not to bring any food or drinks once they get there. They have to throw it away. So it is a little bit tricky. Interestingly, a Girl Scout discovered that lots of people were throwing away food and drink just as they were approaching Westminster Hall because they have to, and has actually worked with a food bank so that all of that can be redistributed. So some really sweet acts of kindness throughout the queue and then at the end of it as well. But I'm very impressed, let's say, with all the people that are doing this, but their spirits are high.
I have to say they're in a much better mood than perhaps I would be, waiting in that kind of a line. But I know that this Queen means so much to them. And thank you, Anna, so much for sharing their stories with us and sharing what has been, a very festive occasion, it seems, out there in London. So thanks very much, Anna. We appreciate it.